India is facing a multi-front challenge along its borders, be it its borders with Pakistan and more recently China and now Nepal. To understand these developments, we are being joined today by Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain. Thanks very much, sir, for taking time out. I want to first begin by asking you, sir, how serious are the developments along the LAC with China? The build-up along the LAC, do you think it's going to fade away in a while?
Not really. In fact, about a fortnight ago, when the issue was still raging in Ladakh, this question was put to me by a lot of television anchors, and I do remember giving out my rationale to them and saying that this is an annual event, maybe a biannual event at the most, and China always wants to coerce India to send home certain messages. It is not about territory and it's not about any other aspect. It is primarily strategic messaging, and it is all about putting India down, telling India that it is not as good as China, and that within Asia it is China which is the preeminent power. Also at the same time focusing India's attention on the Himalayan belt to make sure that India continues to perceive that its main security threats are in the continental domain, that is on the land. While actually all of us, anyone who's a serious strategic analyst will tell you that the opportunities for us all lie in the maritime zone. That's where China's vulnerabilities are, and that's where we should be ramping up our capability. But because China forces us to focus on the Himalayan front and the northern borders, we are forced to somehow give greater priority to that front. And that achieves China's aim every year. This year, the things are slightly different, perhaps to the extent that China has chosen, out of sync suddenly with the situation, the post-COVID kind of a situation which is developing. It's out of sync that it has decided to target India to convey a message to the rest of the world. There's a lot of things happening in China's security environment. There's Hong Kong, there's Taiwan, there is South China Sea. It's recently had a standoff with Vietnam and sinking of a fishing boat there. It's have a problem with Australia. It's got a problem on the economic front with the supply chain, the threats of supply chains moving out of China's manufacturing centers. So with all this, it was necessary for China to send home a strategic message to the world that it is very much in control of things, that in the post-COVID-19 period, the narratives will be set by China, and that it is an equal competitor to the United States of America. I think this is what they attempted to do by ramping up the situation in Ladakh, Sikkim, and along the Nepalese border, and at the moment are diluting that situation, calibrating and diluting it.
Right. With the kind of mobilization that we're seeing general along the border, are you of the view that things are far from over, despite the fact that the corps commanders of both the sides, the Indian side and the Chinese counterpart, met on 6th of June? In your assessment, are things going to escalate from here, or is it going to get better in next coming few months?
See, Shweta, this is a very unpredictable kind of a situation, because we are still in the middle of the pandemic. We haven't come into the post-pandemic period yet. No doubt that when the corps commanders met on the 6th of June, the decisions taken thereon have helped to de-escalate the situation to a point. But India is being realistic. It is ensuring that it keeps its troops there, and not only in Ladakh, it has also reinforced its troops all along the other areas, Arunachal Pradesh, in Sikkim, on the central sector front, that's the Uttarakhand border, and places like that. And it cannot take any chances, because this is a very expensive affair. One fine day you decide to mobilize and take troops up into the high altitude areas and make them do acclimatization, and next day you bring them back, and on the fourth day once again you have to take them back. This is a very, very expensive game which cannot be played by nations like this. So India is doing the right thing. It is playing it coolly. It is de-escalating by pulling back to the extent that China is pulling back its troops in all the areas except on the Pangong Tso, the Fingers area. For that, apparently there will be more talks. I think one set of talks at two-star level have already taken place, and there will be more happening in the near future. I foresee that this situation will de-escalate itself progressively over a period of time. If you just remember, Doklam was 72 days. We are just about now about 40 days or so after the commencement of this phase of tension from the 5th of May last month.
All right. General, I want to draw your attention to what's happening along the Indian-Nepalese border, because I think that's very concerning at the moment. The Nepal Parliament has passed a new map that literally claims Indian territory as its own here in Pithoragarh district in Uttarakhand, where I'm sitting at the moment. In your assessment, General, is this the worst that Indian-Nepalese relationship has been in the history? Because both countries share a very close tie, both politically and culturally. Is this the worst that the relationship has been in history for the two countries?
I don't think it's very fair to grade relations between India and Nepal at different phases at different times. But I do agree with you that this is one of the bad periods, there's no doubt. We had a bad period during Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's time. If you remember, there was a full, almost a complete blockade which was put on Nepal at that time. Essential goods couldn't go in. 2015, we had an almost similar situation with the Nepal. This time, the situation isn't as bad as that. It's in the political domain that a lot is being read, and primarily it is being read as something which is happening at the behest of China. Now, what we are essentially looking at is that the government in Nepal is a Maoist government. It is trying to up the ante. It's trying to play to the galleries as far as China is concerned, and is not very keen to develop a very strong relationship with India. The special relationship which has existed between India and Nepal for many years, it is in the process of attempting to try and dilute that. It doesn't remember one thing, that this relationship is not just a political relationship. As you yourself said, it is a cultural relationship, it's a historical relationship. And I think nowhere stronger than in the military domain, where we have, well, over 30 to 40,000 Nepalese soldiers who are part of our Gurkha Rifles, who many of them have sacrificed their lives for India. We pay pensions to more than 1.5 lakh Gurkha troops, pensioners who are there in Nepal. We've got a Gurkha recruiting depot in Pokhara, and places like that. So our relationship is stronger than this. And I do still think that we need to perhaps walk the extra mile at the moment, make a slightly extra effort at this moment. Prime Minister Modi, I think, is very good at this kind of a thing, and being able to reach out to a neighbor. You can recall what happened in Sri Lanka, you see what's happened in Maldives, and we have managed to recover the situation completely there. So I'm not fearful that the situation is completely out of hand. I do believe that this is part of the overall effort that the Chinese are making to ramp up the psychological and coercive pressure against India. The typical messaging that the neighbors are not with you, the neighbors are with China. So that is the situation.
Well, of course, General, some are saying that it's the KP Oli government banking on the nationalistic sentiment and trying to ride on that nationalistic sentiment in the Nepalese territory. Others are, of course, blaming China for doing its bidding through Nepal at the moment. But the point remains that Kalapani, Limpiadhura and Lipu Lake have been contested areas, and this has been a point of contention between Nepal and India for a while now. What is your expectation of the government right now?
Well, the Government of India side, yes, definitely. I think this issue of the maps and this issue of legislation in the Nepalese Parliament, etc., we need not take it too seriously. The more the Indian media writes on this, focuses on it, the more is it likely to be in support of the Chinese cause. I think it is far better that we do some quiet diplomacy with Nepal. I think Foreign Secretary level talks are due in the very near future. I'm quite confident that, although I am aware that this is not the best kind of environment which is being created for Foreign Secretary level talks, but knowing the maturity of Indian diplomats in Indian diplomacy overall. I'm sure we will play out a very quiet diplomacy with them without attempting to try and to be too loud and try and take it into the media and things like that. That is the way to play this. And let it be completely bilateral. There is no question of anyone entering into this. Our relationship with Nepal is completely bilateral. It's a special relationship. If necessary, the highest level, some visits can be exchanged in the near future. But I do believe that we will overcome this with the kind of maturity that is being displayed.
General, there's been a lot of activities along the LC as well in the last couple of days. There's been firing, some would say even shelling, where civilians have lost their lives in Indian territory. Do you see a correlation with what's happening at LC to what is happening at LAC? Is there a direct correlation that you're drawing at the moment?
It is very tempting to correlate it. There is no doubt. But if you go into the history of the manner in which the LOC every year the actions manifest themselves, you will realize that in the month of May, June, July, these are the months in which a tremendous amount of activity takes place. We have killed, I think, 97 terrorists till yesterday, and this is the figure which last 2 years we have killed over 100, 110 by the end of June. So we are nearing that figure around this time. So there's nothing very unusual which is happening there. These exchanges take place from time to time. What is particularly of interest is that in the last few weeks there have been some very successful operations in South Kashmir, and it seems that the leadership is completely wiped out, and Pakistan is attempting to push in some Pakistani terrorists, high-profile terrorists, to bring in an element of leadership to give it some shape. Otherwise the game seems to be almost up for Pakistan as far as this proxy war in Kashmir is concerned. But having said that, it's important that while what is happening in Ladakh, this is also happening on the line of control, and at a time when Pakistan's financial condition is so precarious. Pakistan has got a reprieve for 4 months from the FATF and should actually be taking greater measures to show itself in greater positive light. But notwithstanding all that, they are not doing it. So obviously it is to bring about certain empathy, sympathy with the Chinese, try and show them that even as they are ramping up pressure, coercive pressure in Ladakh, there is an attempt going on from the Pakistani side here. There is a very interesting revelation this morning, I think, in the media about a Chinese diplomat in Islamabad who has tried to equate, Article 370 with the abrogation of Article 370 with what is happening in Ladakh and what is happening on the line of control. So these are interesting things which are there, observations which are there, because of which you cannot just wish away the fact that there is some element of synchronization between what is happening on the line of control and on the line of action.
All right, so would it be then right to say, General, that India is now engaged on both fronts vis-a-vis China and Pakistan, both on LC and LAC?
No, not really. You see, when we look at dual fronts, and when we look at what is called collusive threats, there is no doubt that there are different domains of collusive threats. Ladakh by itself, or Jammu and Kashmir, with Ladakh on one side and the LOC on one side, is the ideal situation where these coercive threats can really be in sync with each other. But this is still very low level pressure, very low level coercive pressure. This is more projection. This is more making eyes at each other than anything else. It is not yet any element of serious war fighting. You haven't found any element of the Pakistan army which is mobilized. There are only 5,000 odd troops of the PLA who are mobilized, so to say, in Ladakh. Coercive threats or collusive threats on the dual front actually will have a much greater dimension. And that is why I am tempted to say that we are only seeing the beginnings of this, and these are only small messages being sent out by China to us. I don't think this is going to emerge into anything big at the moment.
All right, General, thanks very much for speaking to The Logical Indian. Thanks very much for breaking it all down for our viewers, the complex information that we're getting and the relationships that we're seeing building in Southeast Asia, specifically India's relationship with its neighbors. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.